My name is Sarah, and I'm married to a man named James, who's 2 years younger than me. While I love him dearly, his carelessness often leaves me frustrated. Our relationship began when I was 27 years old, and we met at a matchmaking event. At that time, we were both searching for a life partner. My previous relationships had been disappointing. My past boyfriends either showed no interest in marriage or were struggling financially. But James was different. During our dating period, he would always carry my bags, treat me to meals, and display a kindness that I hadn't experienced before. However, it wasn't long before I realized that these gestures were habitual for him, something he had always done for his sister Emily. This realization left me feeling conflicted. After we got married, James's attitude remained kind, but his priorities shifted. What I once thought was a unique kindness towards me turned out to be something he extended to other women in his life, particularly his sister. James's family includes his mother, his sister, and his father, although his father is still in the picture after a difficult divorce. Several years ago, after a fierce dispute, his parents separated, leaving his mother to live alone. She would often visit us, pleading with James to return home and help her manage. "I'm struggling, James. Your father has abandoned me, and I don't know what to do. Please come back home," she would say, tears welling in her eyes. Moved by his mother's tearful appeals, James began suggesting that we move in with her. "What do you think about living with my mom at her place?" he asked me almost daily. His mother was unemployed, with no income to support herself. She might have received a settlement from the divorce, but it was clear that she was struggling with living and house maintenance expenses. When James lived with her, it wasn't a problem, but since we got married and he moved out, she had been alone. "There's plenty of room at my parents' house, and I don't intend to burden you with household chores. Won't you consider living together?" he asked, adding, "Please, Sarah, think of helping this frail old woman." I was taken aback by his description of her as frail, but I could see the difficulty of their situation. Reluctantly, I agreed to move in with his mother. When I did, James and his mother hugged each other with happiness, and I thought that maybe living together wouldn't be so bad if it made them this happy. Deep down, though, I longed to enjoy newlywed life with just James. Despite being newlyweds, we started living in his mother's house. Both James and I worked, but honestly, James wasn't particularly skilled at his job. His dream was to master making burgers and open his own burger shop. He was apprenticing at a burger joint while also working, which I admired, but it reduced the time he had for our family. During the first month, his mother thanked us for living with her. But as we got busier with work, she began treating the house as her own territory during the day and started being rude to me. "Sarah, don't put plastic bottles in that trash can. How have you been living all this time? I can't believe you don't even know how to sort garbage. What exactly did your parents teach you?" she scolded me one day. I apologized, feeling humiliated. Despite her insistence on proper sorting, I didn't know which trash bin was for what at her house. When we moved in, a lot of garbage came out while we were unpacking, and I tried to sort it accordingly. When I asked her how to sort the waste, she said, "Don't worry about it, I'll sort it out later." Yet, she complained every time I disposed of a plastic bottle, but said nothing when James did the same. I felt like her treatment of me was more than just nagging. She started demanding that I do more housework, even though it was impossible for me to prepare lunch while working. I firmly told her, "It's impossible," but she insisted, "Don't say impossible. As a daughter-in-law, you should comply with my requests." Her attitude surprised and disappointed me. I remembered how she tearfully begged us to live together, and now I was questioning whether it was a bad deal. It seemed her real intention was to secure financial support from her son, and an unwanted daughter-in-law was just an obstacle. As I struggled with my relationship with my mother-in-law, I received news from my company that they were starting remote work. It was deemed less stressful and more efficient than commuting. This remote work was optional, not mandatory, as the company was gathering examples to consider a full-scale implementation. I started working from home, thinking it would enable me to prepare lunch as my mother-in-law had requested. But even after I started working from home and managing the housework, her attitude didn't improve. Instead, she began to express dissatisfaction with my presence at home. If only my daughter-in-law weren't here, Component placement, the atmosphere in the house wouldn't be so bad. I'm really fed up with this, she said, her words cutting deep. Doing housework here felt like a greater burden than normal. James was sloppy, never sorting garbage or taking care of his laundry. It was always me who had to gather his laundry from his room, yet he took this for granted and often complained. Why can't I find my favorite socks? They're just hung out to dry. I plan to wear them today. You're too late with the laundry, Sarah. You should try harder at housework, he said, calmly expressing his dissatisfaction. I was shocked by his words. I didn't understand why I was being blamed when the real problem was James not doing his laundry. Furthermore, his mother chimed in, agreeing with him. That's right, Sarah is always at home, so why can't she manage the household chores properly? She rebuked. I felt like they were mocking me, unaware of the effort I put into maintaining our living standard. But the worst was yet to come. One day, my mother-in-law informed me that Wendy, James's sister, would be coming back to live with us. Wendy is pregnant and wants to give birth at home, she said. I was taken aback by the news, as I hadn't been informed about her return or her pregnancy. It seemed they had discussed it already, but I was completely out of the loop. Even though there was a spare room, the arrival of a pregnant woman in the house would surely add to the financial burden, yet nobody had informed me about this in advance. But what shocked me even more was what my mother-in-law said next. Wendy is coming back for her pregnancy, so someone like you who doesn't earn an income should get out. We don't need a jobless person in this house. Get out before Wendy comes back with her things. If you don't pack up, I'll throw away all your belongings. Stunned, I had to ask, are you serious? Honestly, I felt relieved at the thought of leaving. It was much better to live on my own terms than to be mistreated by this family. The ones who would be troubled by my absence should be my mother-in-law, James, and Wendy. Yet, as if not understanding her own situation, my mother-in-law said, We'll have no problem without you. I was fed up with being looked down upon by my mother-in-law, Wendy, and James's concurrence. James, who was always ladies first in front of his sister and mother, showed indifference to me, always prioritizing them. Maybe during our dates, he was attentive to me just because he used to prioritize his sister and mother back home. But since we started living with his mother, all his kindness was directed towards her, and I received none. Perhaps I was just a supporter for him to realize his dreams, good only for providing money. I immediately contacted my landlord to inform him of my decision to leave. I first said, I'm breaking up with James, so please collect the rent from him or his mother from now on. When he asked why, I explained that I was ordered to leave the house because Wendy was coming back for childbirth. He responded with an apology, I'm really sorry, and assured me to leave the future arrangements to him. Afterward, I stayed in a hotel for a while, searching for a place to live alone. During this time, I received frantic calls from James. What do you mean by divorcing me? And what's this about repayment? I thought we were doing well, he exclaimed. Doing well? You kick out your wife for your sister and you ask what's wrong? I retorted. Kicked out? What are you talking about? Didn't you decide to leave yourself so Wendy wouldn't be stressed during her stay? James said, confused. It seemed my mother-in-law and Wendy had convinced him that I left on my own accord. However, the truth was different. I left because I was told I'd be thrown out with all my belongings if I didn't. I had to escape with my stuff, fearing what might happen if I stayed. I explained, I thought you'd never know the truth about me being expelled by your mother and sister, but to think you actually believed I left on my own accord, that shocked me. By the way, did your father come to the house? I asked. Huh? Yeah, he did. I didn't quite get it. He mentioned something about rent, but we own the house, so there's no rent to pay, James responded. At that moment, I couldn't help but exclaim loudly, What? Did you forget the explanation when we moved in? When your parents got divorced, the house was in your father's name, but your mother refused to leave. In the end, it was rented out for $2,000 a month. Really? He asked, surprised. Yes. Your mother was supposed to pay the rent monthly as part of the property division, but when she couldn't pay, we were asked to live together and pay the rent, I explained further. But I've never paid any rent, he said, shocked. That makes sense, I replied. Your income was low because you spent a lot of time training at the burger shop. I've been covering the $2,000 rent. I used to give it directly to your mother, who then made the payment from her bank account. I informed you about this at the beginning of our cohabitation. I'm appalled that your mother forgot I was paying the rent. It's clear I've been paying $2,000 every month, but now that we're separating, I won't pay for that house anymore, I stated firmly. James was stunned. That's why I informed your father. Since I won't be paying anymore, your mother should get the money from you. He came to talk about this today. Hearing this, James was flustered, but I couldn't understand why he was so perturbed. James, who was so absorbed in his training and considerate towards his mother, leaving me without kindness, now acted like a victim. I realized once again what a terrible family they were. Anyway, your father should have received the divorce papers I filled out. Make sure you pay up, I added. Wait, what is this promissory note about? James asked. I sighed. Why do you so easily forget important things? That promissory note is something you suggested, remember? You said, I'll work hard to pursue my dream, so I'll leave the household finances to you. I'll calculate and repay all the excess payments later. That's why I made the promissory note. Oh, did I say that? James responded in a small, uncertain voice. Has he finally remembered? I wondered. He seemed to have forgotten what he once promised. I'm moving forward with the divorce. I can't afford to wait for your dream to come true. If we hadn't lived together, you wouldn't have gone so overboard paying $2,000 in rent plus the living expenses for 3 people every month. It was an unnecessary expense. The rent and living expenses of our previous apartment weren't that high, but living in your family home drove up costs. Therefore, the amount you owe me kept increasing. Please don't divorce me. I have no one but you, James pleaded. What? I don't need a husband like you. Someone who doesn't pay, neglects housework, doesn't cherish his wife, and disregards family. I don't need such a husband. If you don't want to submit the divorce papers, shall we discuss it through a lawyer? I said, and then hung up the phone. Later, James apparently lashed out at his mother and sister for the first time. Why did you do something to drive Sarah out? Because of you, I can't pursue my dream, and I'm now buried in debt, he yelled. His mother and Wendy were scolded by James for the first time, with Wendy in tears and his mother in shock. Despite this situation, James's father firmly declared, if you can't make the financial payments, leave this house by the end of the month. He threatened to call the police if they were still there next month, leaving them scrambling to pack. Wendy's husband came to pick her up, learning everything from his father-in-law and reprimanding her for her shameful behavior. Meanwhile, James and his mother were forced to live in a shabby apartment. Their current living situation is drastically different from before, and both are struggling. James has quit his apprenticeship at the burger shop to work hard and earn money, taking on 2 part-time jobs to make the payments to me. His mother, told by James to earn the living expenses, is working multiple part-time jobs to cover the rent and living expenses for the 2 of them. It seems they are having a hard time now after living an easy life before. I feel they finally got their just desserts. The thought of being free from their exploitation makes me feel like my life is brightening up. Determined to reclaim the time I lost, I've decided to pursue my